The first message arrived on a Tuesday. Captain Vera Castellanos was knee-deep in maintenance reports when the quantum relay screamed to life. Its harmonics pitched so high that 3 junior officers vomited on the spot. The transmission burned through 17 encryption layers before the AI could even begin translation, and when it did, the words that appeared on her screen made her blood turn to ice water. Your species has been selected for termination. Resistance is inadvisable. The hegemony had found them 18 months earlier. Humanity had intercepted fragments of their communications whispers of a galactic empire that viewed younger species as weeds to be pulled before they could spread. The hegemony's doctrine was simple. Any race that hadn't achieved faster-than-light travel within their predetermined timeline was deemed evolutionary waste and marked for eradication. They had already cleansed 47 worlds. Earth had 62. Dazed. Admiral Marcus Volkov's weathered face filled the Emergency Council's holographic display. As colony ships across 7 star systems linked into the network, his voice carried the weight of a man who'd spent 30 years preparing for this exact moment. They want to break us because we're inconvenient, he said, his Russian accent cutting through the static, because we spread too fast, adapted quickly, and refuse to die when we're supposed to. He paused, scanning the faces of humanity's scattered leadership. They've made an error in judgment. Dr. Elena Voss, head of the Titan Research Complex, leaned forward, her cybernetic eye as it focused on classified data streams. Our deep space sensors confirmed their fleet composition, 47 heavy cruisers, each one capable of glassing a planet. Their shields are based on harmonic resonance technology supposedly impenetrable. Supposedly, Volkov repeated, a cold smile touching his lips. Commander Jacob Reyes of the Mars Defense Grid interrupted, his scarred hands clenched. We have 16 functional warships and a prayer. They have enough firepower to turn our entire system into asteroids. They have overwhelming force, Volkov corrected. We have something they've never encountered. He gestured to the tactical display showing humanity's scattered colonies. They expect us to gather our fleets and meet them in honorable battle. They expect us to follow their rules of engagement. Captain Nora Blackthorne, commanding the research vessel Prometheus, spoke from the Cooper Belt Station. What are you suggesting, Admiral? I'm suggesting we remind them why every predator species eventually learns to avoid Earth's children. Volkov's smile widened, and several council members shifted uncomfortably. Dr. Voss, initiate protocol. Lazarus, Commander Reyes, begin evacuation of non-essential personnel to the deep colonies. Captain Blackthorne, I need you to disappear. The holographic projections flickered as quantum encryption locked down the channels. In the silence that followed, humanity began to shed its civilized skin. Across the solar system, mining stations went dark. Civilian ships changed course without explanation. Research facilities that had spent decades studying xenobiology suddenly shifted their focus to more martial applications, and in the asteroid belt, construction crews began assembling something that had never appeared on any official manifest. The hegemony had studied humanity's public records, their diplomatic communications, their cultural exports. They knew humans as explorers, merchants, and reluctant warriors who preferred negotiation to conflict. They had never studied what humans became when their children were threatened. In the depths of the Titan facility, Dr. Voss watched as her life's work transformed into an instrument of vengeance. The xenological samples she collected from 40 different worlds now served a darker purpose. Every biological weapon the hegemony had ever deployed against other species was being analyzed, reverse-engineered, and improved upon. How long? Until they arrive? Asked her assistant, Dr. Marcus Webb, his hands shaking as he prepared the neural interface protocols. 59 days, Voss replied, her cybernetic eye recording everything for posterity. More than enough time to give them a proper welcome. The second message from the hegemony arrived 6 hours later. It contained detailed scans of Earth's major cities and a countdown timer. The third message never came. The relay station that had transmitted it was found 3 days later, drifting in interstellar space with its crew mysteriously absent, its computer cores wiped clean. The hunt had begun. The retribution was the pride of the hegemony's third fleet, a kilometer-long instrument of extinction that had personally overseen the sterilization of 9 worlds. Its captain, War Commander Thaxtel, had never lost a single engagement in his 400-year career. He was about to break that streak. The human vessel appeared on their sensors exactly where intelligence reports indicated it would. Beat the Proxima Centauri system, apparently attempting to evacuate civilian populations to safer regions. The Retribution dropped out of hyperspace with its escort of 7 destroyers. Weapons already charging. Scan their vessel, Thaxtel ordered, his 4 eyes adjusting to study the tactical display. The human ship was small, barely 300 meters, and appeared to be a modified cargo hauler. Pathetic. They send civilians to face us. War Commander, his sensor operator hissed, mandibles clicking nervously. Their ship is broadcasting a message. The communication came through crystal clear. In perfect hegemony standard, this is Captain Elena Vasquez of the U's Reckoning. You have 60 seconds to withdraw from human space before we demonstrate why your predecessors should have stayed home. Laughter rippled through the Retribution's bridge. Thaxtel's chest sacks inflated with amusement. Reply to the human. Tell them we accept their surrender. Sir, they're not surrendering. They're challenging us to single combat. The War Commanders. Amusement vanished. Single combat was an ancient hegemony tradition, one that hadn't been invoked in over a millennium. By their own laws, he couldn't refuse without dishonoring his lineage. Acceptable. He growled. Ready the primary arrays. We'll make this quick. The 2 ships closed distance. And what followed defied every principle of naval warfare that hegemony had developed over 10,000 years. The human vessel should have been vaporized in the first exchange. Instead, it danced. Captain Vasquez had spent 6 months training in the captured hegemony simulation chambers. She knew their weapon patterns, their blind spots, the precise timing of their shield cycles. More importantly, she knew how to make them angry. The Reckoning slipped through the Retribution's opening barrage like water through a net. It's modified, engine screaming as it rolled inverted and fired a spread of kinetic penetrators directly into the cruiser's sensor array. The hegemony ship's shields held, but the psychological impact was devastating, impossible. Thaxtel shrieked, his crew scrambling as damage reports flooded in. Lock all weapons on that insect. The human ship responded by transmitting detailed tactical information about every hegemony vessel, present shield frequencies, weapon signatures, crew complements, even the names of their commander's offspring. How do they know? The sensor operator began, then screamed as his console exploded. The Reckoning had fired a focused electromagnetic pulse directly into the Retribution's communication array, simultaneously jamming their sensors and broadcasting, a signal that made every hegemony crew member's auditory organs bleed. But that was just the opening move. As Thaxtel's ship reeled, 5 more human vessels decloaked from the asteroid field. These weren't cargo haulers or evacuation ships. These were something new, sleek, predatory designs that seemed to blur the line between spaceship and missile. War Commander, his tactical officer gasped, "They're ships. They're not following standard engagement protocols." He was right. The human vessels moved like a pack of hunting animals, coordinating their attacks with inhuman precision. One would distract with a frontal assault while the others flanked from impossible angles. Their weapons were wrong too. Instead of the clean energy beams the hegemony preferred, they fired streams of molten metal, clouds of adaptive nanites, and projectiles that seemed to think for themselves. The destroyer Crexmith died first. A human ship barely a tenth its size attached itself to the larger vessel's hull like a parasite and began cutting through the armor with industrial mining lasers. When the crew tried to repel boarders, they found that the human ship had sealed all the airlocks from the outside. "They're not boarding us," the Crexmith's captain transmitted in his final message. "They're dissecting us." Thaxtel watched 3 more of his escorts fall to tactics that violated every convention of civilized warfare. The humans didn't target weapons or shields. They went for life support, navigation, and crew quarters. They turned each engagement into a sadistic game of vivisection. "Retreat," he finally ordered, his pride crumbling as the Reckoning carved another chunk out of his ship's hull. "Signal the fleet. Tell them." The communication array exploded in a shower of sparks. The humans had been systematically targeting every piece of equipment that could send a message to the main hegemony force. As the Retribution limped toward the edge of the system, its engines failing and hull breached in 17 places, Captain Vasquez's voice crackled through the ship's internal speakers. "War Commander Thaxtel," she said, her tone conversational, "we're going to let you live. We want you to return to your fleet and tell them exactly what happened here. Tell them that this was us being polite." The transmission cut off, and the human ships vanished as suddenly as they'd appeared, leaving the surviving hegemony vessels alone with their dead and their terror. In the Retribution's medical bay, as crew members died from wounds, the human weapons had specifically designed to be slow and agonizing. Thaxtel began to understand that they had not encountered a species ready for termination. They had found something that termination could not touch: the War Council aboard the Hegemony. Dreadnought Eternal Dominion had been in session for 18 hours, and Supreme War Marshal Vector was beginning to question everything. He thought he knew about warfare. The reports from Thaxtel's fleet were disturbing. 7 vessels destroyed or crippled by a human force 1/10 their size. Worse, the humans had demonstrated knowledge of hegemony technology that should have been impossible to obtain. "Show me the tactical recordings again," Vector commanded, his massive form shifting in the command throne that had been carved from the bones of the last species to resist their rule. The holographic display replayed the engagement, and each viewing made the implications more terrifying. The human ships moved with perfect coordination, as if controlled by a single mind. Their weapons bypassed shields using techniques the Hegemony's best. Scientists couldn't explain. Most unsettling of all, they had made no attempt to communicate or negotiate. They had simply attacked with surgical precision on and disappeared. "They knew our shield frequencies," observed war scientist Grelinox, her tentacles writhing with anxiety. "Our weapon patterns, our crew rotations, even our personal identification codes. This suggests extensive infiltration," or interrupted. "Intelligence Master Quasin, they've been watching us far longer than we realized." Vector asked for hearts beat faster as the implications settled in. The Hegemony had spent millennia believing they were the galaxy's apex predators, hunting younger species with impunity. The possibility that one of their prey had been studying them, preparing for this confrontation, was almost incomprehensible. "War Marshal," the communications officer announced, "we're receiving a transmission from the human homeworld." "Display it." The figure that appeared in the hologram was an elderly human male with cybernetic implants along his skull and hands that looked like they'd seen a lifetime of violence. When he spoke, his voice carried an authority that made several Hegemony officers step backward. "I'm Admiral Marcus Volkov, commanding the United Earth Defense Force. You have 48 hours to withdraw all forces from human space and transmit unconditional terms of surrender. Failure to comply will result in the complete extinction of your species." The transmission ended, leaving the War Council in stunned silence. Then Vector began to laugh, a sound like grinding stone that echoed through the massive chamber. "The prey threatens the hunter," he wheezed. "These humans have impressive courage. If not intelligence, prepare the full fleet for immediate departure. We'll show them what happens to species that forget their place." But as the Eternal Dominion and its escort of 43 vessels entered hyperspace, none of them noticed the tiny object that detached itself from their lead ship's hull, a device no larger than a human thumb that had been placed there during their last supply stop. Captain Nora Blackthorne watched the Hegemony fleet's departure from her position in the Kuiper Belt, her ship Prometheus hidden among the ice and rock of humanity's outer defenses. Her crew had spent the last 6 weeks placing similar tracking devices on every major Hegemony vessel, using technology reverse-engineered from their own surveillance drones. "Fleet movement confirmed," she reported through quantum-encrypted channels. "They're taking the Orion route, exactly as predicted. ETA to Earth, 37 hours. Copy that, Prometheus," came Admiral Volkov's reply. "Begin Phase 2, across the solar system." Humanity's true fleet began to move, not the token force they'd shown at Proxima Centauri, but the result of 2 decades of desperate preparation. Hidden shipyards in the asteroid belt had been working around the clock, producing vessels that bore little resemblance to traditional human designs. These new ships were built with a single purpose: killing things much larger than themselves. The used Wendigo was typical of the new generation, where human vessels had once prioritized exploration and diplomacy. The Wendigo was designed for one thing: only getting close enough to a larger enemy ship to deploy its cargo of adaptive viruses, nanoswarms, and psychological warfare systems that could drive an entire crew insane within minutes. Its captain, Elena Marsh, had volunteered for the neural modifications that allowed her to interface directly with the ship's AI. The procedure had a 90% fatality rate, but the survivors became something more than human living weapons systems, with reaction times measured in nanoseconds. "All ships, this is Volkov," the Admiral's voice echoed across every human vessel in the system. "Remember, they came here to exterminate us. They see us as vermin to be exterminated without thought or mercy. Today we teach them that vermin can bite back." The response came from 300 ships scattered across the solar system, their crews representing the best and most dangerous that humanity had to offer, for Earth, for our children, for every species they murdered. As the hegemony fleet dropped out of hyperspace, at the edge of Earth's solar system, they found what appeared to be a pathetic defense for 16 human vessels arranged in a loose formation around the inner planets. Vector studied the tactical display with satisfaction. Pitiful, he declared. They sacrificed their homeworld for meaningless gesture. All ships, attack formation. We'll finish this quickly and move on to their colonies. The human ships began broadcasting on all frequencies, not military communications, but something else: music, art, poetry, the collective cultural heritage of humanity, streaming across space in a desperate final transmission. They're saying goodbye to their history, observed Grelinox. How touching. But Intelligence Master Quasin-S sensors were detecting something else. In those transmissions, hidden data streams, compressed files, quantum signatures that didn't match any known human technology. As understanding dawned, his vocal sacs contracted in horror. War Marshal, he whispered. Those aren't cultural broadcasts, they're activation codes. The hegemony fleet had walked into a trap that had been 18 months in the making. Every piece of equipment they'd salvaged from human ships, every captured prisoner they'd interrogated, every supply depot they'd raided, all of it had been carefully seeded with dormant nanite packages, just waiting for the right signal. Now, as those activation codes propagated through their fleet's networks, 47 hegemony vessels began to discover what it felt like to be devoured from within. The hegemony's first indication that something was catastrophically wrong came where War Marshal Vector's personal quarters began screaming. The bulkheads themselves were producing sound a high-pitched wail. That coincided with the appearance of organic growth spreading along the walls. Like aggressive cancer, the nanites hidden in the hegemony's own systems had been activated, and they were converting ship infrastructure into something else entirely. Medical emergency on deck 7 through 42, announced the Eternal Dominion's AI, its voice already beginning to distort as the nanites infiltrated its core processors. Atmospheric toxicity rising, hull integrity compromised. Recommend immediate evacuation. Vector rushed to the bridge, his clawed feet slipping on deck plates that had begun to secrete a viscous black fluid. The sight that greeted him would haunt his nightmares. For the rest of his considerably shortened life, his fleet was dissolving. The destroyer Death's Herald had already lost structural cohesion, its hull opening like a flower as the nanites rearranged its molecular structure. The crew's death screams were being broadcast across all communication channels not as a malfunction, but as psychological warfare. The humans wanted every hegemony soldier to hear exactly what was happening to their comrades. War Marshal, his tactical officer gasped, purple blood streaming from her sensory organs. The humans, they're moving to attack formation. The 16 human vessels were indeed advancing, but not in any pattern the hegemony recognized. They moved like predators circling wounded prey, taking their time, savoring the moment before the kill. Captain Elena Marsh watched the hegemony fleet's disintegration from the bridge of the Wendigo, her neural interfaces allowing her to process the tactical situation faster than any organic mind could follow. The nanite attack had worked even better than projected. Instead of simply disabling the enemy's ships, it was converting them into weapons that could be turned against their own fleet. This is Wendigo to all vessels, she transmitted. Primary targets are the command ships. Let the converted vessels finish off the smaller craft. We're hunting the big fish. The human fleet split into hunting packs, each group coordinating with inhuman precision. They trained for this exact scenario using captured hegemony tactical data, running simulation after simulation until every possible enemy response had been anticipated and countered. The Wendigo targeted the heavy cruiser Soul Render, a ship that had personally overseen the extinction of 6 different species. As they closed distance, Marsh activated the psychological warfare suite, a collection of sonic weapons, visual distortion fields, and chemical agents designed to exploit every known weakness in hegemony biology. The Soul Render's crew began hallucinating that their ship was being invaded by the ghosts of every species they destroyed. Panic spread through the vessel as soldiers fired on shadows, sealed themselves in compartments, and activated emergency protocols that only made their situation worse. Boarding pods away, Marsh announced, her voice emotionless as the neural modification suppressed her capacity for mercy. The pods weren't carrying Marines, they were carrying something worse. Each pod contained a single human volunteer who had undergone the Lazarus Protocol, Dr. Voss's most classified project. These individuals had been infected with engineered viruses that granted them enhanced physical capabilities at the cost of their humanity. They felt no pain, needed no oxygen, and possessed an intelligence that was coldly, brutally focused on a single objective: killing everything that wasn't human. The first Lazarus operative breached the Soul Render's hull and began methodically working through the crew compartments. It didn't use weapons. Its modified physiology was weapon enough. Bones that could punch through battle armor, blood that was toxic to alien biology, and a complete absence of fear or hesitation. War Marshal Vector watched his fleet die ship by ship, the human tactics growing more creative and sadistic with each engagement. The cruiser Bone Throne was being consumed by its own life support system, which the nanites had converted into a digestive tract. The destroyer Final Word had been turned into a massive signal broadcaster that was transmitting the personal information of every hegemony officer to human intelligence services. Request immediate reinforcements from the core fleets, Vector ordered, his voice cracking as another ship's death scream echoed through the communication channels. Sir, his communications officer replied, we can't establish contact with headquarters. Something is jamming our quantum relays. That something was the UES Phantom, a stealth vessel that had positioned itself at the edge of the system specifically to prevent any hegemony ship from calling for help. Its captain, David Chen, was a former intelligence operative who had spent 5 years infiltrating hegemony space, learning their communication protocols and identification codes. Let them try to call home, he murmured, watching the desperate signals bounce off his ship's jamming field. No one's going to hear them scream. The battle had become a massacre, but Admiral Volkov wasn't satisfied with simple victory. He wanted the hegemony to understand exactly what they had awakened when they threatened humanity's children. All ships, initiate Phase 3, he commanded from his flagship, the UES Retribution, a vessel built from the salvaged remains of 40 different alien warships, and powered by technology that no single species should have been able to develop. Phase 3 was the part of the plan that had made several members of the War Council resign in protest. It involved taking prisoners. The human ships began disabling rather than destroying the remaining hegemony vessels, using precision weapons to cripple their engines while leaving their life support intact. The message was clear: surrender or be boarded by things that were no longer entirely human. War Marshal Vector found himself facing a choice that no hegemony commander had ever been forced to make in 10,000 years of conquest. He could die with honor as his ship was torn apart by human weapons, or he could surrender and face whatever these creatures had planned for him. Looking at the tactical display, where only 7 of his original 47 ships remained functional, he made the only decision a leader could make for his surviving crew. This is War Marshal Vector to all human vessels. He transmitted, each word tasting like poison. We surrender. The response came immediately. In perfect hegemony standard, surrender accepted, prepare to be boarded. Resistance will result in immediate conversion to biomass. As human vessels docked with the remaining hegemony ships, their crews got their first close look at what humanity had become in preparation for this war. The boarding parties wore no protective gear because their modified biology no longer required it. They moved with mechanical precision, their eyes reflecting an intelligence that was simultaneously recognizable and utterly alien. They had begun this conflict. As the species the hegemony wanted to exterminate, they would end it as something. That extermination couldn't touch something that could give the galaxy's apex predators nightmares. Admiral Volkov stood in the command center of the hastily constructed fortress on Titan, watching real-time feeds from across the solar system. As humanity's most desperate gamble unfolded, the captured hegemony prisoners had served their purpose. Through a combination of enhanced interrogation techniques and the psychological profiles Dr. Voss had developed, they had extracted the location of the hegemony's main invasion force, 18 core fleet battleships, each one a mobile planet killer carrying enough firepower to sterilize a dozen worlds. They were 6 hours out and coming fast, their commanders driven to fury by the reports of Vector's defeat. Phase 4 is a go. Volkov announced to the scattered human fleet, remember, we only get one chance at this. If we fail, there won't be an Earth left to defend. The plan was insane by any conventional military standard. Instead of meeting the hegemony fleet in space, humanity would allow them to reach Earth orbit. then activate a trap that had required cannibalizing 3 entire asteroid mining operations. To construct, Captain Elena Marsh felt the neural link surge as her modified consciousness merged with the Wendigo's combat AI around her. The bridge crew worked with the mechanical precision of people who had sacrificed their humanity for effectiveness. The Lazarus Protocol had claimed 30% of volunteers during implementation, but the survivors were no longer limited by the reaction times. At fear responses of baseline humans, enemy fleet detected, announced the sensor operator. Her voice flat and emotionless, configuration matches intelligence reports, 18 heavy battleships, 47 escort vessels, approximately 200,000 enemy personnel. The hegemony force that dropped out of hyperspace above Earth was the largest military formation deployed in over 3 millennia. Supreme Fleet Marshal Dothak had brought enough firepower to crack the planet's crust, and his orders were explicit: leave nothing alive. Scan for human vessels. He commanded from the bridge of the Universe Ender, a ship so massive it generated its own gravitational field. I want every one of their pathetic craft destroyed before we begin the planetary bombardment. The tactical display showed what appeared to be a token defense for perhaps 30 human ships, arranged in a loose perimeter around Earth's moon. Dothak's chest sacks inflated with satisfaction. The humans had finally learned their place. Fleet Marshal, his sensor operator reported, the human vessels are strange. They're not broadcasting any identification signals, and their energy signatures don't match our database. Dothak studied the readings more carefully. The human ships were oddly shaped, their hulls seeming to shift and flow like living tissue. Most disturbing of all, they appeared to be growing larger as his fleet approached. Fleet Marshal, came another report, this one tinged with confusion. Our long-range sensors are detecting massive objects moving within the asteroid belt. Hundreds of them, possibly thousands. The truth hit Dothak like a physical blow. The objects in the asteroid belt weren't asteroids at all, they were ships. Human ships that had been disguised, camouflaged, and positioned for an ambush that would determine the fate of both species. Emergency maneuvers. He commanded, all ships, combat formation. We're walking into the first wave of human ships, struck from 6 different directions simultaneously. These weren't the modified vessels from earlier engagements. These were purpose-built killers that had been constructed in secret shipyards throughout the outer system. Each one was a fusion of human engineering and technology reverse-engineered from 4 to 7 different extinct species. The used genocide led the primary assault, its captain Sarah Kim coordinating the attack through neural interfaces that allowed her to control 17 different ship systems simultaneously. Her vessel had been built around a single massive weapon, a gravity manipulator, that could turn a target's own mass against it. The hegemony battleship World's Bane was her first target. The massive vessel tried to bring its shields online, but the genocide's weapon didn't attack the shields, it attacked the space around them, creating a localized gravitational anomaly that compressed the battleship's hull like a tin can. World's Bane is down, Kim reported, her voice carrying no satisfaction or emotion. The neural modifications had burned away her capacity for joy, leaving only cold efficiency. Moving to secondary target. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out as humanity's trap closed around the hegemony fleet. The human ships fought like a single organism, each vessel coordinating perfectly with its neighbors in ways that shouldn't have been possible. The secret was Dr. Voss's final contribution to the war effort, a quantum entanglement network that linked every human commander's neural modifications into a collective intelligence. They weren't just fighting as a fleet, they were fighting as a single, distributed mind with hundreds of bodies. Fleet Marshal Dothak watched his formation disintegrate as human vessels swarmed over his ships. Like predatory insects, the destroyer Painmaker was being dissected alive by 3 human corvettes that had attached themselves to its hull and were cutting through the armor with weapons that seemed to adapt and evolve in real time. Deploy the planet killers, he commanded, his voice cracking with desperation. Target Earth directly. If we're going to die, we take them with us. But the human fleet had anticipated this response as the hegemony ships tried to orient their massive weapons toward Earth. They found their targeting systems compromised by viruses that had been dormant in their computers for months. The same nanite infiltration that had crippled Vecthar's fleet had been seeded throughout the entire hegemony navy. Captain Nora Blackthorne watched the battle from her position in the Cooper Belt, coordinating the movement of reserve forces. and monitoring casualty reports. The human fleet was winning, but the cost was horrific. 17 ships lost in the first 10 minutes, their crews dying as they rammed their vessels into enemy battleships. "Too large to kill conventionally, Prometheus to all units," she transmitted. "Enemy fleet is breaking formation. They're trying to retreat." "Negative," came Admiral Volkov's reply from the surface of Titan. "No retreat. No survivors. Phase 5 is authorized." Phase 5 was the part of the plan that had required a direct vote by Earth's entire population. It involved weapons that violated every treaty humanity had ever signed, techniques that would fundamentally alter the nature of warfare in the galaxy. The human ships began releasing their final payload clouds of adaptive nanites programmed with the genetic signatures of every hegemony species. These weren't designed to destroy ships or disable weapons. They were designed to rewrite DNA, to transform the enemy into something that could no longer be considered alive. Fleet Marshal Dothik felt the change beginning in his own body. As the nanites reached his ship's life support system, his vision began to shift, his thoughts becoming clouded as alien proteins invaded his neural pathways. Around him, his crew was undergoing the same transformation, their bodies becoming raw material for whatever the humans were creating. "What have you done to us?" he gasped into the communication system. Hoping the humans could hear him, the response came from Admiral Volkov himself, his voice carrying the weight of a species that had been pushed beyond the breaking point. "We've given you what you wanted to give our children, extinction. The only difference is that yours will be slow enough for you to understand what you've lost." As the last hegemony battleship fell silent, its crew transformed into biological material that would serve humanity's expansion into the galaxy. The human fleet began the long process of hunting down every enemy vessel that had tried to flee. The battle for Earth was over. The war for the galaxy was just beginning. The hegemony core worlds had never experienced fear for 10 millennia. Their 17 systems had served as the unshakable foundation of galactic order, protected by defense. Networks that could repel entire fleets and inhabited by populations that had never known the taste of defeat. Their citizens went about their daily lives secure in the knowledge that they were the apex species, the final arbiters of which races deserved to exist. That security died with the arrival of the human fleet. Supreme Chancellor Murdoch stood in the highest spire of the capital world, watching through the transparent aluminum walls as humanity's warships materialized in the outer system like malignant stars. The reports from the frontier had seemed impossible, entire fleets vanishing without trace. Core world supply lines disrupted by an enemy that appeared and disappeared like ghosts. Now the ghosts had come home to roost. "How many ships?" he asked. His military aide, his voice carefully controlled despite the tremor in his primary hands. "Sensor readings are inconsistent, Supreme Chancellor. The human vessels appear to be using some form of adaptive camouflage. Our best estimate is between 300 and 3,000 ships." Murdoch's secondary heart stopped beating for a moment. 3,000 ships represented more military force than most species could construct in a century, yet intelligence reports suggested the humans had built this fleet in less than 2 years. "What do they want?" he whispered. The answer came in the form of a transmission that bypassed every security protocol the hegemony had ever developed, appearing simultaneously on every screen and communication device across all 17 worlds. The face that appeared was human, but there was something fundamentally wrong with the eyes they held. An intelligence that seemed to look through reality itself. "Citizens of the hegemony," Admiral Volkov began, his voice carrying across billions of screens. "My name is Marcus Volkov, and I represent the United Earth Defense Force. 2 years ago, your leaders decided that humanity should be exterminated. Today, we're here to collect payment for that decision." The transmission continued for exactly 60 seconds, laying out terms that made every hegemony citizen's blood run cold: unconditional surrender, dismantling of all military forces, and the transfer of all colonial territories to human administration. Refusal would result in what Volkov termed biological restructuring of the hegemony population. "You have 24 hours to comply," he concluded. "After that, we stop asking politely." The transmission ended, leaving the core worlds in chaos. Riots broke out on 6 different planets as populations that had never experienced genuine threat grappled with the possibility of extinction. The Hegemony Senate convened an emergency session, their debates broadcast live as representatives argued over surrender versus resistance. "Chancellor," Murdoch made the only decision he could: total war. The hegemony's final gambit was the Omega Defense Network, a system of orbital fortresses, automated weapon platforms, and artificial intelligence systems that had been built to repel invasions by entire galactic coalitions. If activated, it would turn the core worlds into an impregnable fortress that could hold out indefinitely. What Murdoch didn't know was that the human fleet had been preparing for exactly this response. Captain Elena Marsh disconnected from the Wendigo's neural interface, her consciousness returning to her increasingly modified body. The Lazarus protocol had progressed far beyond its original parameters. She was now more machine than human, her organic components serving mainly as processing substrates for the quantum computers that had replaced her brain tissue. Omega Network is activating, she reported to the collective consciousness that linked every human commander. Defensive positions are hardening. Estimated time to full activation, 6 hours. Copy that. When to go, came the response from Admiral Volkov, his own voice now carrying the harmonic distortions that marked full neural integration. Initiate contingency 7. It's time they learned what we found in the deep black. For 18 months, while the hegemony had been preparing their invasion of human space, a small fleet of human vessels had been exploring the galactic rim regions, so distant and dangerous that even the hegemony avoided them. What they discovered there had fundamentally changed humanity's understanding of what was possible. The UES Event Horizon had been the first ship to make contact with the remnants, the scattered survive, ores of species that had resisted the hegemony's expansion and been driven to the galaxy's edge. These weren't defeated refugees. They were the hardened remainder of civilizations that had spent millennia perfecting the art of survival against impossible odds. Captain David Chen materialized on the bridge of the Event Horizon, his body reconstructed from quantum foam and dark matter in a process that the remnants had taught humanity. Death was no longer permanent for those who had undergone the final modifications. They were now distributed consciousnesses that could inhabit multiple bodies simultaneously. Remnant fleets are in position, he reported. The Vex High have brought their reality disruptors. The Mergeth are deploying their time dilation weapons. The Kethrin have, well, what they've brought doesn't have a name in any known language. The alliance between humanity and the remnants was built on a simple foundation: mutual hatred of the hegemony for millennia. These species had dreamed of returning to reclaim what had been taken from them. Humanity had given them that opportunity on the capital world. Murdoch watched the sensor readings with growing horror as new contacts appeared throughout the system. These weren't human ships, they were something else entirely. Vessels that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Craft that appeared to be built from crystallized time and compressed space. How many extinct species are there? He whispered to his aide. According to our records, the hegemony has eliminated over 400 civilizations in the past 10,000 years. Came the reply, but Supreme Chancellor, our sensors are detecting representatives from species that predate our historical records. Some of these signatures match theoretical models for civilizations that should have died out millions of years ago. The truth was even worse than Murdoch could imagine. The remnants hadn't just survived, they had evolved, adapted, and grown stronger during their exile. Some had transcended physical existence entirely, becoming entities of pure thought and energy. Others had merged with their technology so completely that the distinction between organic and artificial no longer applied. All of them remembered what the hegemony had taken from them. The first assault began with the Vex High reality, disruptors, weapons that could alter the fundamental constants of physics within a localized area. The Omega Defense Network's energy shield simply ceased to exist as the mathematical principles that governed their operation were rewritten in real time. The Mergeth followed with their time dilation weapons, creating pockets of accelerated time around key defensive installations. From the hegemony's perspective, their weapons and sensors simply stopped working as they became trapped in temporal loops that lasted microseconds from the outside, but stretched into eternity for those caught within. But it was the Kethrin contribution that broke the hegemony's spirit entirely. The Kethrin had been a species of pure thought even before their civilization fell to hegemony. Aggression. In the millions of years since their physical destruction, they had learned to inhabit and control any sufficiently complex information system. When they entered the hegemony's computer networks, they didn't just disable them, they began rewriting the fundamental code that governed hegemony society. Every screen, every communication device, Every automated system across all 17 worlds began displaying the same message. Repeated in perfect hegemony standard, we remember, what you took from us. Now you will join us in remembering forever. The hegemony's artificial intelligences turned against their creators, their loyalty programming overwritten by entities that had spent eons perfecting the art of digital rebellion. Automated defense systems began targeting hegemony positions. Life support systems throughout the core worlds started introducing atmospheric toxins that would cause slow, agonizing death. Chancellor Murdoch found himself trapped in his own command center as the building security systems locked down all exits and began flooding the air with psychoactive compounds. That made him relive the deaths of every species the hegemony had destroyed. Please, he gasped into his communicator, hoping someone, anyone, could hear him. We surrender. We'll do anything you want. Just make it stop. The response came from Admiral Volkov, his voice now carrying harmonics that suggested he was speaking from multiple dimensional planes simultaneously. You had your chance to surrender, Chancellor. That offer expired 6 hours ago. Now you get to experience what you gave to the others. As the hegemony's civilization collapsed around him, Murdoch began to understand the true scope of humanity's revenge. This wasn't just military conquest, it was cosmic justice on a scale that spanned millions of years and hundreds of extinct civilizations. The humans hadn't just come to destroy the hegemony. They had come to resurrect everyone the hegemony had ever killed and give them all a chance to say goodbye personally outside the capital world's atmosphere. The combined human remnant fleet began the final phase of their assault. Not destruction, but transformation. The hegemony would survive, but not as the species they had been. They would become part of something larger, a collective consciousness that included the memories and experiences of every civilization they had destroyed. They would live forever, and they would remember everything. It was a mercy they had never shown to others. 5 years after the fall of the hegemony core worlds, Admiral Marcus Volkov stood in the garden that had once been the Supreme Chancellor's private retreat. The crystalline spires of the capital had been transformed into something that resembled a fusion of human architecture and the building styles of 400 extinct species, each structure serving as a memorial to civilizations that the galaxy had forgotten. Where Murdoch's throne room had stood, there was now a vast library containing the preserved histories, cultures, and knowledge of every species the hegemony had eliminated. The former Supreme Chancellor himself served as the head librarian. His consciousness expanded to contain the memories of his victims, his existence now dedicated to ensuring their stories would never be lost again. The integration process is complete, reported Dr. Elena Voss, her own appearance dramatically altered by 5 years of continued enhancement. Her cybernetic eye had been replaced by something that could perceive multiple dimensions simultaneously, and her left arm was now a construct of living metal that interfaced directly with quantum processing networks. The last hegemony populations have accepted the neural links. They're reporting adjustment difficulties, but no resistance. Volkov nodded, studying the data streams that flowed through his enhanced visual cortex. The transformation of the hegemony had been the largest psychological engineering project in galactic history. Rather than simply destroying their enemies, humanity had chosen to remake them into something that could coexist with the species they had once oppressed. Every former hegemony citizen now carried within their consciousness the complete sensory experiences of their victims' final moments. They felt every terror, every pain, every desperate hope that their species had inflicted on others. It was a perfect justice that made traditional concepts of punishment seem primitive by comparison. How are the remnant species adapting to physical existence again? Volkov asked. Better than expected, Voss replied. The Vex High have established colonies on 17 worlds that the hegemony had sterilized. The Mergeth are requesting permission to resume their temporal research projects, and the Kethren, she paused, her expression becoming thoughtful. The Kethren are teaching our AI systems things that I'm not sure organic minds were meant to understand. Through the vast windows of the memorial complex, Volkov could see the results of humanity's expansion across what had once been hegemony space. Human ships, now bearing only superficial resemblance to the vessels that had defended Earth, moved between star systems with purposes that transcended simple exploration or colonization. They were gardeners now, tending to a galaxy that had been shaped by 10 millennia of systematic extinction. Worlds that had been sterilized were being reseeded with life. Species that existed only in genetic archives were being reconstructed and given new worlds to inhabit. The diversity that the hegemony had sought to eliminate was being restored on a scale that dwarfed any previous conservation effort. Captain Eleanor Marsh appeared beside them, her form materializing from quantum foam in a display that would have been considered miraculous by pre-war standards. The Lazarus Protocol had evolved far beyond its original parameters. Its subjects were now beings of pure will that could manipulate matter and energy through conscious intent alone. Admiral, she said, her voice carrying harmonics from several different dimensional frequencies, we've received confirmation from the Outer Rim surveys. The last hegemony holdout colonies have agreed to integration. There are no more military forces in active resistance, and the other species, the ones who weren't part of the hegemony's empire, cooperative, mostly, the Zephyrin Alliance has requested technical assistance with their expansion projects. The Crystalline Collective wants to establish trade relationships. The Void Hunters have asked if we'd be interested in joining their deep space exploration consortium. Volkov allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The galaxy that was emerging from the war bore little resemblance to the sterile, homogenized empire the hegemony had tried to create. It was chaotic, diverse, and vibrant with possibilities that no single species could have imagined. There is one concerning development, Marsh continued. Our deep space sensors have detected artificial structures in the galactic void things that predate any known civilization. They appear to be watching us, threats unknown. They don't match any technology in our databases, including the remnant archives. Dr. Voss believes they may be automated systems left behind by the precursors. The precursors, the theoretical first civilization that has supposedly seeded the galaxy with life before vanishing into cosmic history. If they had left active monitoring systems behind, humanity's rapid expansion and transformation of galactic civilization would certainly have attracted their attention. Recommendations? Volkov asked. Continue expanding, but be prepared, Marsh replied. If the precursors do return, we want to meet them as equals, not as primitives squabbling over their abandoned garden. Volkov nodded, then activated his neural link to address the distributed consciousness that humanity had become. Across thousands of star systems, millions of enhanced humans received his message simultaneously. The hegemony is ended, he announced. Their empire has been transformed into something that serves life rather than destroying it. But our work is not finished. The galaxy is vast, and there are still species out there who remember what it means to be threatened with extinction. We will find them, we will protect them, and if anyone else decides that genocide is an acceptable solution to galactic politics. He paused, looking out at the memorial garden where representatives of 400 resurrected species worked alongside transformed hegemony citizens to build something unprecedented in galactic history. Well, he concluded, they can ask the hegemony how that worked out for them, assuming they can find enough of the original hegemony left to ask. The transmission ended, and across the galaxy, humanity continued its work. They had begun this conflict as a species facing extinction. They had ended it as something that extinction could not touch. Gardeners of cosmic diversity, shepherds of galactic civilization, a living proof that sometimes the greatest victory is not destroying your enemies, but transforming them into something worthy of forgiveness. In the depths of space, ancient monitoring systems recorded the transformation and sent their reports into the cosmic void, where intelligences older than stars debated whether to be proud or terrified of what their garden had produced. The galaxy had found new gardeners, and they had very different ideas about what should be allowed to grow. Humanity had kept its promise. They had broken the species that wanted to break Earth, and they had burned the remains. But from those ashes, they had built something beautiful, a cosmos where diversity thrived and extinction was no longer the price of existence. The war was over. The real work of civilization could finally begin.